Good evening, welcome. We're back live again. I can see we've got a few people in here already, so thank you for joining me. Tonight, or this evening, or whatever time of the day it is in your part of the world, we're going to talk about track day preparation. What we're not going to do is go through detailed race car or track car setup, but just track day preparation to get the most fun, most reliable fun from your Subaru on a track day. Hi Fred, hi mate, hi David, Saeed, yeah, Doug, hi. Good to see you on board. For those of you that have been here before, you know the score. We'll try and keep the questions about track day preparation to start with. And as usual, it will go into an open questions and answer session for the remainder. Good morning from Australia, Andrew. God, what time is it there? It must be well early. Yeah, so it will be open questions and answer, but there's quite a lot to go through on the track day preparation. So if we can keep any questions relating to that, at least to start with, that'll be perfect. If you're watching this on replay, if you watch the whole stream, then your question might get answered. If it doesn't, then pop it in the comments below and I will reply. So we will kick off with track day preparation. You know, I did my first track day the day after I had the first service on my Hawkeye STI, and from that point I was addicted. The rush of driving the Subaru or my Subaru on a track was nothing like you can see on a road. But despite them being badged as rally cars or race ready cars, they're not. So what I wanted to go through is some of the things that I learned through that journey of a standard car, taking it on track, what issues came up and how I fixed them. And hopefully if you've got any questions or any further comments or suggestions that you've done, then please put them in and I'll bring them up on the stream. So, do you need to modify a Subaru for a track day? You can take a standard Subaru like I did, take it out on a track day, drive around, have a good laugh. But you will find some issues from the basic design of a Subaru will come to light very quickly. The first one, is just purely something that the guys in the UK probably see more than anywhere else in the world, is this thing called fuel surge. Because of where the fuel pickup is on the right hand side of the fuel tank, on the roads in the UK, we're coming off roundabouts, off on a right hand bend, put your foot down and you get the stutter of fuel starvation. On track, that happens even earlier. Most tracks are clockwise. If you know of any that aren't clockwise, then let me know. Be an interesting test for you. But most tracks are clockwise, so therefore the majority of corners are right-handers. So fuel surge, what do you do about it? What is it and what do you do about it? Cool, crikey, we got loads of comments in there. Right, hi Grant, hi Chris. Right, okay, I'll mark that question, Zaid. I told you you'd have questions. Right, okay, so fuel starvation. Right, so as the fuel moves from the right hand side of the tank to the left hand side of the tank, depending on how quickly you're driving, you get an issue where the fuel is not where the fuel pump and the pickup is. And at that point, you get a really bad stutter and the car effectively feels like it's running out. Big issue, but the bigger issue is the point just before that, where there is some fuel, but not enough for it to stop it detonating. So, even if you're not getting to that point, there is a bit before that where it is running lean. So it's important to try and solve the issue. One way of solving it is to always keep your tank above half full. Another way is to make sure that your fuel pump, filter bag and pickup sit right at the bottom of the fuel tank. There are other things that you can do. There's a Spec C fuel pump assembly, which is essentially a box around the fuel pump that holds some fuel in there. Does help, but it doesn't solve the problem. The only way to totally solve the problem is a swell pot and an external fuel pump, and therefore you've got like 1 litre or 2 litres of fuel sitting there that will always be enough. So depending on how seriously you're wanting to take the track days, to start with, just make sure your fuel's at least half a tank at all times. But beyond that, you may well look to the Spec C assembly or to the swell pot side of things. All right, let's have a look, see if there's any questions on that. I've seen a couple of engines go on cars where they haven't actually had fuel starvation where it cuts out, but it has just got to the point just before that where it's leaned out, and seen that from data logs. And it's really destructive, detonation, melting pistons, head gaskets, you name it. But it's not a nice situation, and if you're on full throttle going around a right-hander, uphill right-handers are particularly bad. But yeah, it's probably the first thing that you'll come across on a track day in a Subaru. The next thing you'll find out is heat in the brakes in particular to start with. WX in particular, the standard pads are not very good. The standard discs are not very big. The brake lines, because the fluid heats up, because the calipers can't get rid of enough heat, the brake lines being rubber, they go all spongy, so your pedal gets longer and spongier as the day goes on. So braided lines solve the brake line issue, proper pads solve the pad issue, and you might want to invest over time in some vented discs that are a little bit more able to handle the extra heat. Brake pads are a personal choice, but from my own personal experiences, Frodo 2500s, the pad material, the resin that holds the pad material together with excess heat starts bleeding onto the disc, so you get sort of high spots on the disc and a vibration, and it feels like the whole car's shaking to pieces. It's not the disc warping, it's the pads bleeding onto the disc. And if you drive with that for too long, then those high spots, the actual chemical makeup of the metal on the disc changes to a material called, I think it's cementite, which is much harder than the steel, and you've effectively ruined a set of discs because the pads are not up to it. So Frodo DS 2500s, very bad, particularly for track days, and also in the UK EBC pads they're in my opinion, they're not very good, not for track. Right, any questions on that? Right, okay, the fuel side of things, fuel hangers, there's a Spec C one that has the the container at the bottom, which does get rid of it to a degree, and it's probably the least intrusive way of doing it. Swell pots, you've got to run external lines, and if it's a daily car, then you can get a smell of fuel, and obviously an external pump is going to be noisier. And dead cans on a track day, no. But you know, if you understand what's happening, you know, your map should be safe enough to cope with that, and it should take out ignition timing. It should sort of take preventative measures, but it can't always do everything. So just be aware that it could be happening if you're approaching that sort of fuel level. It depends how quickly you're driving. If, you know, I hear people say, "Oh, I take it down to less than a quarter of a tank on track, and I've never had fuel starvation," and it's like, you're not driving quick enough. So yeah, it depends how quickly you drive and how good your tyres are. Right. Right, okay. Brake disc recommendations and brake pads. I've always liked the Performance Friction Z-rated pads. They're good daily driver pad, as well as fast road and some track use. The Performance Friction discs are really good as well. At the moment, I'm running DBA Extreme brake pads and loving those with the standard discs, but I haven't done a track day yet in this Forester. In the other Forester, I did track day at Brands and also a track day over the Nürburgring, and I was running Project Mu pads in that with AP discs and AP 6-pot calipers, and they were great. Yeah, EBC, they keep red stuff, yellow stuff, blue stuff, but they're all effectively brown stuff in my opinion. Sorry EBC if you work for them, but yeah, not very good in my experience on a Subaru. Right, so next on from your brakes, you might have an issue with heat in the oil. You wouldn't know about it because the standard Subaru hasn't got an oil temperature sensor. So from a gauge point of view, if you were going to put gauges in, then oil pressure and oil temperature would be really good ones to start with. Really good ones. Oil temperature, if it gets too hot, come back into the pits. Let it cool down for a while. Do a warm down lap, but then come back in. If you get really carried away with track days, then an oil cooler would be a really good idea. Doesn't have to be much, but it just helps to keep it under control, because hot oil isn't really that effective at protecting the engine. Right. Okay. So what temperature is safe for the oil? Depends on the oil. With the Motul 1550 that I was using in the track car, then I was comfortable with it going up to 120 degrees centigrade, which is quite hot, too hot for normal oil, but the Motul handled that really easily. Okay, 10W60, yeah, that's decent oil. If it's decent, mate, fully synthetic, should be fine. Just about to test some different oil, which I will, before I pass judgment on it, I'll test it myself and see whether that's any good. But I'm pretty hopeful that it's going to be a good oil, because the Motul is ridiculously expensive at the moment. Right, talking about oil, the next problem you may or may not be aware of, depending on whether you've got a gauge or not, and depending on whether you're driving fast. Everyone thinks they're driving fast on a track day, but until you see other people driving, and other people driving your car in particular, you don't realise. Oil surge, it's a particular problem on the single scroll sumps where it's a big basin and the oil pickup is in the middle. When the engine's running, there is, I think ProDrive did a test a while back, and there was actually only about half a litre of oil in the sump at any one time while the engine's running. So you imagine half a litre of oil in that big sump sloshing around. It doesn't take much for the oil pickup to pick up some air, and at that point you've got air going around the oil galleries, and air isn't a very good lubricant. So long corners, long high G corners are a particular issue. At Snetterton in the UK, Coram is a really long high G corner, and Chris Curve at Cadwell, Clearways at Brands Hatch, lots of corners at Nürburgring. Oil surge is an issue and will destroy the bottom end of your car very easily, particularly if you're not checking the oil levels during the day. It might be half a litre in a normal environment, but if you're losing a bit of oil during the day or breathing a bit of oil, then that half litre in the sump might only be a quarter of a litre. So always check the levels. Right, where are we on here? Bum bum bum. Okay, right. I'll come back to that one. Subi tuned alignment and camber settings. I will come back to that. And I said I wasn't going to go into race car setup, but camber and those sort of things is useful to know what's going on. Right, so you've sorted out the fuel surge, you've sorted out your brakes. Make sure that the coolant temperatures are not going high, so make sure your radiator's in good condition, your hoses are in good condition, because there will be extra pressure in the system, and it doesn't take much for one of the standard hoses, if it's really old, to throw a wobbly and split, and that's the end of day. So that's it as far as track day preparation. On the day itself, there's certain things that I would recommend, because it's a harsh environment. You're not normally on the roads driving that fast for that long, so it's useful to do a few things during the day. So yeah, limit the track time that you doing. So don't stay out there for an hour pounding round and round and round, because it will die. They're not designed for that. Limit it, half a dozen hot laps, and then a cool down lap, and then in the pits, when you're in the pits or paddock area, don't just park up, put the handbrake on. There's a lot of heat in the brakes. What I tended to do was take a plank of wood and use that as the handbrake so that the car wouldn't roll away. Leave it in gear, or let it idle for a while to cool down. Leave it in gear. Once it's cooled down and you switch it off, leave the handbrake off. Otherwise the pads will seize to the discs. Check the oil every time you come back in. Check the oil level. Make sure that it's at the maximum, if not slightly over, like a smidgen over, because every little bit helps on that. You don't want to go too high on that. Right. Bum, bum, bum. Right. Another thing to do when you come back in the pits, check the tyre pressures, check the tyre condition. Because if you're driving your car to the track day, you need to have tyres that are legal and safe for driving home. So either take spare sets of tyres or spare set of wheels, or make sure that they're in good condition for you to be able to drive home. You don't want to be leaving all your rubber on the tarmac there and then be down to the threads to drive home and only to get pulled as soon as you're getting out of the circuit. Not a good day. Another thing to do when you come into the paddock area of the pits, check the coolant. Make sure it's not spitting coolant out anywhere, because you don't want to be putting coolant on the track for anyone else, because it's an easy accident because it's very slippery stuff. You don't want your engine to be overheating either, so check the expansion tank, make sure that's not overflowing. And this last, not last one, but fluids, like not the car, you get very dehydrated on a track day and you don't realize it until later on in the afternoon, and dehydration, your concentration goes, and accidents tend to be in late afternoon sessions where you're saying, oh, I'm just going to do one more lap, one more session, and it's that last lap that always ends in a bit of a disaster. So, for times that I've gone over to the Nürburgring, I always come back with the last lap still on the ticket, because that's the lap that I would have had an accident on. It's a superstitious thing, possibly waste of money, yeah, probably. But I've seen lots of people have accidents. Oh, just went out for a last lap. Right, spares. What do you take with you? Obviously, jack and tools. You don't want to be that person that's running up and down the pit lane, asking to borrow tools from people. You want to kind of be self-sufficient as far as you possibly can. Jerry cans with fuel, toolkit that's got the right stuff in there, a tyre pressure gauge. A useful thing is a infrared heat gun, just to see what the temperatures are, because that is going to tell you an awful lot. So let's get me out of the way of that. Looking at the tyre temperatures, if with your infrared heat gun, if you're measuring the temperature inner, middle and outer, if the inner is hotter than the middle and the outer, then you've got too much negative camber. If the outer is hotter than the middle and the inner, you've not got enough negative camber. If your middle is hotter than the outside and the inner, then you've got too much tyre pressure. And if the middle is cooler than the outer edges, you haven't got enough tyre pressure. Ideally, what you want is them all even across all 3 points on each of the four corners. I'll leave that up if you want to screen grab that or whatever. That's what I've used on track days or right the way through into time attack, just to see whether I needed more camber or less camber. Lots of negative camber looks fabulous, but if it's actually reducing the amount of grip that you got, then it's slower. And there's a big obsession with people running low pressures because it will help grip. It doesn't necessarily help grip. The heat gun shows you what's going on. Very useful. Right, any questions on that? Because I know, Doug, you had a question about camber. Yeah, Super Tunes, you had a question on that, alignment and camber settings. Yeah, it depends on what tyres you're running. For camber settings, if you've got soft sidewall tyres that are folding under, then you maybe want to either consider getting some more track focused tyres or adjusting the camber settings so that the tyre temperatures are even across the tread. It's all gone quiet in the questions. Right, okay, let's get that off the screen and back to me, unfortunately. Sorry. Right, so what spares do you take? Tools, jack, tyre brace, locking wheel nut. A spare set of keys is a really good thing. If you're running a GD Subaru, then if it's got the immobiliser pad, it'd be useful to have that number because some of the tracks have got telephone masts, and that can interfere with the standard immobiliser key. I had that at the Nürburgring car park where the immobiliser just would not work. Luckily, I had the code for the pin pad. Yeah, other spares, sensors. Crank sensor is a good one. Heat and vibration tends to damage that. The cam sensor as well, be useful having a spare one of those and a couple of fuses. Maybe the main fuses, like the pink fuses, the square ones, would be a good get out jail free card to actually get you home at the end of the day. And talking about getting home at the end of the day is to kind of have a backup plan just in case you run out of talent or the car breaks. Try and think about how you would get back, like a recovery service or track day insurance or those kind of things. But also things like having a spare set of brake pads just in case you've cooked yours during the day. You just have an option to get back at the end of the day. Make sure your tyres are still legal. Make sure you got enough fuel to get back. Take spare oil. Those sort of things. Just try and be as self-sufficient as you can be. There's always going to be things that you don't necessarily think of, but as you do more and more track days, now if you break something on the track day, buy 2 of it and then keep one as a spare. Right, and I think that's done for me from a track day point of view. OBD reader, yeah, that's good thing. I always have my laptop there anyway, but yeah, OBD reader, good idea. And Steve, yeah, spare fan belt, really good idea. Remember once I put my car into the barrier at Alton Park and smashed a brake disc and a track rod end and whatever. So, you know, luckily there was a Motor Parts Direct Euro car parts reasonably close, so I managed to source those on the day and changed it and managed to drive it home. Right. Waterless coolant. Yeah, I've heard that can work. I haven't used it personally, but it can work from what they're saying in the sales literature, but I haven't tried it personally. And this one is, people think that track cars or track day cars should be like mega powerful, but they tend to run less power than if the car was used on the road because they're in a quite a high stress environment, and if you can't slightly detune your car for a track day, take a bottle of octane booster or something along those lines to make sure that you're getting the best quality fuel in there. Personally, I always chuck a litre of methanol in just as an octane booster. It's effectively free. Doesn't need tuning for 1 litre of methanol. Just acts as an octane booster. And never use the fuel pumps at the track. All right. Okay, so let's done that one. Right. So SDI oil cooler conversion. I don't know what you're meaning with the oil cooler conversion. The SDIs have the same sort of modine as a WRX. So if you want to go into that, but oil cooling is a good idea if you're going to be driving fast. If you're limiting your session times, it's not really needed. Okay, right. Any other questions on there before we go into an open questions? Oh, here we go. Right, another question from Zaid, the man who said he had no questions. Right, SDI seat with a harness. They're not designed to be used with harnesses, and particularly the angles that most people tend to run the harnesses up from the rear seats. And in an accident, the seat isn't designed to be sort of pulled down. So I don't think they're particularly safe, but it is a pain being sort of thrown around or sliding around on the seats. I have done it, but you know, I was berated when I did it, so I'm not going to condone it now. There's nothing better than having a proper race seat in there, or not something with totally impractical high sides and the head surrounds, but just a good quality bucket seat that you can fit in properly. It makes controlling the car a lot easier. Right. Anywhere where there's airflow. I've run them on the top of the bonnet, top of the bumper bar, in the main grille, in front of the radiator. There's plenty of air going through there, so it's not going to affect the coolant temperatures. I've also run in the bit behind, like a square oil cooler behind the fog light covers, and put some ducting onto it. That works really well. I've seen people over the top of the engine where the top mount intercooler would be under the scoop. If they were running a front mount, put an oil cooler there. Personally, I don't like it because if it's going to drip, it's going to drip onto the turbo. All right, let's come back onto that. But yeah, anything in airflow, and ideally ducted onto it and away from it. 10 rows good, 16 rows better. But with a oil cooler, you get a slight pressure drop in the oil system. How many degrees? Oh, I don't know how many degrees that it. How many degrees it would affect it, but if you get a thermostatic one, then if the temperature gets high, then the oil cooler will be in operation. They work well until you push them really high power. They work really well. 16 row would be more than adequate. You just need to make sure if you're doing a takeoff from the oil cooler, is if the oil cooler pipes go anywhere near the headers, ideally you don't want them to go near the headers, but sometimes it can't be avoided. But put fire sleeve over the hose, because it's a very big fire if they burn through from the headers. Right. Gauges, oil temperature, yeah. Oil pressure, would say a definite. AFR, you're not really going to be looking at that when you're on track. If you're in a right-hand drive car, most tracks are clockwise, so have those gauges on the pillar where you can actually see them while you're cornering. If you're in a left-hand drive car, centre dash bit is good, so that you can actually see them rather than looking away from the corner. Yeah, oil temperature, oil pressure are the key ones. AFR, not really, but you know, if you tune in the car yourself, you'll need one of those in there, or you'll want one of those in there. Okay, right. So let's get rid of that. Mark asking about cam belts. The only times I've seen cam belts break is where they've been fitted incorrectly, i.e. the guide on the crankshaft is too tight and they slightly rub, and then that frays it, or the little belt guides on the corners, if they're fitted too tight. I've not seen a standard cam belt break. Yeah, I've run standard cam belts. I think on the race car, I was running a Cosworth cam belt on that, but the Forester just had a normal Gates belt, Daco as well, I think. Right. Uprated oil pump for a track or a road car. Yes, it's a difficult one, this, really, because a standard STI engine, like a JDM STI, for example, will quite easily do 450 horsepower with a 10mm oil pump on there. The 11mm will supply more oil if there's more oil in the sump to supply. If there's air and oil, then it's just going to pump more of that air and oil around the engine, so isn't necessarily going to make it more safe. The 12mm, I've heard reports of them sort of cavitating with the oil, so I would never go for a 12mm, but yeah, 11mm, if you're doing an engine build, an 11mm wouldn't be a bad plan, but I wouldn't say it's essential. I personally, for myself, if I was running up to 500 or 600 horsepower, probably 550, I would run 10mm oil pump. Right. Ooh, idle for a while, tank has rusted slightly inside as it's been empty. I am very well, thank you, Connor. Yeah, it's difficult to clean them out. If it's only slightly, then you know, maybe a sacrificial fuel filter or two would help get rid of any debris that's in there before you start tuning it or running it aggressively. Cleaning them out would be very difficult. It's tank out and assemblies out and all the rest of that. But for the sake of a new bag and a new fuel filter or two, yeah, I think it'd be worthwhile. And no problem at all. We're off the subject now of track days, unless anyone's got any other questions on that. But they're incredible fun, and extremely safe, because there aren't pedestrians, there's no horses, there's no potholes. Most people are driving in the same direction. But yeah, they are very addictive. And the Subaru isn't a track car, it isn't a rally car. It needs some help to be track ready. Like the fuel surge is a big issue. The oil surge is an even bigger issue once you get quick enough, or if you've got sticky tyres, or if you sorted the handling and the brakes. Power isn't necessarily the thing. Right. Yeah, no, they'll be fine, I'm sure. Right, will standard suspension be sufficient? Yeah, it depends how fast you want to go. You can have a lot of fun without being super fast. The standard suspension will cope with it, no problem at all. The JDM STI, the little Japanese dude did 8 minutes or 7 minutes 50 or whatever around the Nürburgring, was on standard suspension. It'll cope with it. It might lean a little bit, it might go side to side a bit, but they're actually quite predictable and controllable on the standard suspension. It's when people fit aftermarket coilovers that it makes them a little bit uncontrollable. There was a question about alignment settings. Where was that question? Who was that question from? Pads, coolant. Subi tunes, yeah. Alignment. If you watched my video on the suspension setup in my Forester, for a general track day setting, I think that's perfect. There's 0 toe in, 0 toe out. It's predictable. It breaks straight. And for track, it's a good starting point. Some people like toe in, some people like toe out. Personally, I think it's really twitchy, and toe in tends to understeer more. But it's a personal preference. All right, yeah, Doug, you asked about alignment as well. You also asked about sway bars. Sway bars always reduce grip. That's how they work. So going too big on the sway bars, the anti-roll bars, actually reduces the amount of grip that you get on the inside wheel. The better solution to solve grip and those sort of things is looking at actual suspension geometry, but that is a lot more complicated and is worthy of a very, very detailed video. I changed the suspension pickup points on the race car just to sort of improve the roll center, because that helped it corner flatter. But the Subaru setup is a compromise, so you can't do an awful lot of those things. Right. Paul, hi. yeah, it's as good. Yeah. Or SO Supreme Plus 99 is also just as good. Right. Any more questions on the track day side of things? What tracks have you guys got locally to you? All right. Da-da-da-da. Tracks, no. Okay. I think I've done all the questions actually. Yeah. Right. Okay, that's a good one. I've not driven a BRZ on track. I've tuned a few of them. Great handling car, not enough power. I'm trying to source an FA20 engined STI for me to use as a development car, because the turboed version of the FA never made it into the UK, and it's a real shame. Very jealous looking at you guys in the States with the WRX 2024 TR and whatever you. I think a lot of the issues that are brought up will apply to the BRZ, Andrew. Connor, you're welcome, mate. It annoys me that tuners don't share information with people, because ultimately a better informed Subaru owner, stays with the brand for longer. They spend more money ultimately. It's people that come into the brand and don't know what they've got, and then break the car because they don't understand what's going on, and then leave and then say, oh, Subarus are crap because we've all got chocolate engines or whatever. And yeah, it's the lack of knowledge and the secrecy that is annoying to me. I never lock my maps. It's just, if I've got nothing to hide, so if there's something in there that isn't right, then so be it, but I don't hide behind a locked map. Right, so what have we got? Oh, okay. The Bend Motorsport Park, Malala. Was that Australia? I'm guessing it is with a name like that. Yeah, that's pretty cool. Great name. Castle Combe for Ben. Yeah. Donington and Mallory. Oh, Donington's great. Mallory, God, I did a track day there in the fog. Yeah, there's only basically 3 corners, but a good tradition. Yeah, Knockhill, that is crazy circuit. Crazy circuit. I've never driven a track like that where you basically have to leave your brain at home. Okay, that's weird. So they spin around the other way. Half the year they're clockwise and the other half they're anti-clockwise. That's really weird. Englandshire. Yeah, Cadwell, well worth the trip. That's probably my favourite track in the UK. Cadwell just rewards you for getting perfect lines through Hall bends, and obviously Nürburgring is super special. Alton Park is amazing as well. Okay, what else have we got there? Local track Thruxton, yeah. That's good, yeah. Yeah, Fensport done a lot with the GT86, and turbocharging and supercharge on those is superb. It needs it. It needs the extra power. Such a shame they didn't bring an STI one. Turbo 300 horsepower, one of those would be lovely. Croft. I scared myself silly at Croft. First time I ever run mine with the GT37 on there. I came into the pit shaking. Adrenaline. For track days, Steve? Or just in general? Yeah, I'd love to go over for the TT, but it's crazy. Crazy. Right, okay, well, let's answer those. First 5 things I would change on a stock unmolested car. Brakes. Brake lines, brake pads. Because I don't think they're up to the job of stopping a car quickly and repeatedly. Standard suspension, I probably would leave that for the moment, depending on what unmolested car it was. But it does a good enough job. I'd change the rear anti-roll bar just to make it a bit pointier going into corners, make it turn in a bit better. Steering geometry, or wheel alignment and geometry, tyres, and a map, obviously. I think that's 5, maybe 6. Right, I think we're at the end of the session, so unless you got any last ditch questions. Oh, one question. Ooh. Right, twin scroll EJ207. Right, I did a JDM twin scroll blob eye a few weeks back with one of the Fastline twin scroll VF400s, and on V-Power it made 428. On 20% meth it made 470. So it depends whether that's close enough to the 500. If it is, then great. If it isn't, you're into the territories of getting rid of a twin scroll turbo. There are lots of what they call twin entry turbos. They are not a twin scroll, so it would make it a lot laggier than what you've got at the moment, and in my opinion it would ruin it. The twin scroll works amazingly. It's quick, it's spools up, you've got loads of torque. With 500 horsepower and a single scroll turbo, you'll be slower than 450 with a twin scroll. Tyres. Oh, okay. Yeah. Road tyres that you could also use on the track day. I used to love the Bridgestone REO 70s, but you can't get them anymore. They had such a stiff sidewall that they were really responsive. A lot of the aftermarket tyres like Toyo and what have you, I think the sidewalls are too soft until you get to the 888s, in which case they're amazing, but for a road car, they're very noisy, the same as the Yokohama A0048s or A0004s or whatever they are now. Michelin Pilot Cup Sports, brilliant tyres. yeah, there's lots. It depends, you know, if you're in the UK at the moment, it's under about 25 foot of water, constant rain. So Vriedersteins are perfect for that. I put the what have I got on mine at the moment? Yokohama. They're very good. Yeah, they are good. They're probably well old now. Well old. They've got to be 10 years old at least. There's a date on them, manufacture date. If you have a look at those, it's probably 10, 15 years old. Right. Built an engine a couple of weeks ago with the RA block. Had the pistons out to compare to the standard Hawkeye or the 2.5 STI pistons. And there is no difference in the piston itself apart from a bit of extra webbing on the bottom underneath the gudgeon pin. I believe, from what I've been told by a machine shop, that the block material is somehow harder than the old or the standard 2.5, so maybe the block doesn't move as much. But it looks a good option for sub 400. Yeah, I'd probably run that just under 400. Okay, right. That'll be the end of today's session. Next week, I'm just going to do a full-on open questions and answer. Anything you like. Yeah, anything you like, any subject, Subaru related or tuning related, and I'll try my best to answer them. If it's a super complicated question, then if you can put it in the comments beforehand, and I'll try and do some research. So, right, thank you very much, and I'll see you next week.